and good afternoon from Vienna and to the world. Yeah, it's a great pleasure for us, for Henrik and me, for being here and have also this collaborative task to moderate the session. So we will only have 10 flash talks, but is separated more on the side of mortality and the other side of restoration. So unfairly spoken, it's more, so Henrik is more the guy for damaging and I'm the guy for repairing. Sorry, Henrik. Yeah, it is a pleasure that we had in the morning the two keynote speeches, and there was, I think, an ideal introductory talk, because we saw on one hand, by the speech of Florian Kraxner, that we have lots of dynamics and also threats leading to mortality on one hand, and on the other hand, it was really a pleasure to see that one of the major outcomes of the speech of Daniela Kleinschmidt was that we should have a focus on FLR as a social task and a social issue. So I guess this is a perfect introductory for our talk. So we have no introductory slides, and so we go strictly and directly into the talks. And for the first two talks, I would like to ask Henrik to take over the moderation.
So yeah, welcome to that session. Here comes the tree killer. I actually do have that reputation at our institute. Maybe for the structure, just to mention this. So we have these two talks on mortality, and then we do have a short period of questions. So if you have technical questions in terms of understanding really towards these two talks, you can then ask these questions. And then at the very end, we do have a discussion round where we ask the speakers to come up here, and we also want you to discuss all these topics. Okay, what did I want to say? Yeah, I wanted also to link to Florian Kraxner's talk this morning, because basically what he showed, and this was impressive, that you've seen that, maybe remember the map from Bill Enderich's science paper from a couple of weeks ago, the risk that forests are going to be facing in the future. What Florian did not show is that I could have given him a slide with a map of what climate change has done to our forests during the last 40 to 50 years. And this is, I would say, as impressive as the outlook into the future. So this, and with this image here, I guess I justify my presence in a session on restoration, because once you have this, you have to think about how to restore these forests. So now we welcome our first speaker. Now it's all mixed up, but Jan-Peter George is talking about how dry is too dry for the European forest.
Good afternoon. Quite a pleasure to be here in Vienna. Since I had been living here for 11 years, it's always a pleasure for me to come back and to visit nice colleagues. As Hendrik already mentioned, my 2-year research is about how global change type droughts are currently shaping mortality dynamics in European forests. And since I have to boil this down into a 5-minute talk, I will start right away and don't waste much time with introductory words or something like this. So as we all know, European forests are an invaluable source of income, welfare, biodiversity, and protection for all of us. And we also know that climate change, and in particular drought, is posing a challenge with all its immediate consequences for European forests, as we have seen yesterday, for instance, in the Steinfeld region. Well, and according to this, I will try to answer basically 2 questions in this talk, which is, has mortality really been increasing in the last 25 years, or is it just a social media phenomenon? And the second is, So to what extent are global change type droughts involved in this? So one or the other of you probably not familiar with the term global change type drought. So what do we mean by or with global change type drought? What you can see here in this figure is so every black dot in these bins represent a distinct drought event that was retrieved by a drought indicator, which is called soil moisture anomaly. I will come back to this a little bit later. And of course, you can see that in average years like 2001 to 2002, the majority of drought events are so-called light droughts, which do not really pose a challenge to trees. But then, of course, we also have severe and harmful droughts, which you can see on this lower right corner. Well, and in 2003, you see there's a little bit of a difference because there are indeed more and more retrievals which occupy this lower right part. And this made people believe that 2003 was some kind of a millennial drought, also capable of studying effects in trees, which may tell us more about tree performance in the future. And this is to some extent true. 2003 was a drought year, but when you compare this to the more recent years, I think it's obvious that we get more and more drought events which are really posing challenges to the forest. And you see that 18, 19, and 20 are 3 years in sequence with more or less equal drought severity. And this means that we cannot even talk any longer about average years, wet years, and dry years. It's more that every year is dry, it just depends on where. Well, and we have analyzed 2 data sets. One is based on a huge amount of ground observations, namely 3.7 million ground observations across Europe on a 16 by 16 kilometer grid, where we can derive from when a tree has died in this survey. And our predictor data set is soil moisture anomaly. And this is based on a hydrological rainfall runoff model. And it gives us every 10 days a new retrieval across the entire continent. This data set has been validated against more than 700 ground stations. And we figured out that it works very well, except in areas where you have very low climatic variability. But usually these are also the areas where we don't expect forest vegetation. So it's reasonable to use this data set. And this figure relates to the first question I would like to answer. So is there really increasing mortality in European forests? And there's a clear answer, which is yes, for almost all species. So you see this red line, which shows you the mortality rates during the last 25 years, and in blue, the accompanying soil moisture anomaly. And you see that, yeah, oh, 1 minute, okay. I will fasten on. There's only one species, which is silverfare, where we don't see any trend, which probably underpins that silverfare is a reliable and promising candidate for future forest management. Well, some people might ask, well, where is this happening? And the answer is also very clear. It's happening everywhere. As you can see, for instance, for Norway spruce. So it's not that we just see mortality outside the natural distribution range of Norway spruce. We see it also within the natural distribution. Yes, and this is more or less my last slide. So this relates to the second question, where we wanted to know, is drought really an important driver of mortality? And you can see in this lower right figure that it is the drier it gets, the lower is the survival probability when we calculate it across the whole continent. But it's mainly previous year drought which is driving this, and I think I will spare this for the discussion to explain why. Just the very last slide, and then I will finish. what we can derive from our data is that the mortality rate in Europe has not fallen below the zero line since 2012. And this is a very alarming trend, as we think. Well, these are contributors, I have to mention them, I'm very sorry. And this is my working place, which we call the most beautiful middle of nowhere in Estonia. If you are in Estonia and want to visit us or ask a question, feel free to do so. And I hope I've flashed at least some of you. Thank you very much.
So, yeah, thank you very much. Questions will be then after the second talk. So we promised that we wouldn't pull people off the stage and nobody would have to run here. But maybe in the end, we have to get back to these rules. Okay, so the second speaker is Raphael Dutrieux, and he's talking about, he's from, I forgot to mention your institution, I'm sorry, the National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and the Environment in France. And he's talking about large-scale detection of bark-beetle outbreaks.
Thank you. So I will present to you an open source framework for operational monitoring of bark-beetle outbreaks using Sentinel-2 time series. So to give you some context, climate change is facilitating bark-beetle development, and it increases the probability of droughts, which has led to an amplification of bark-beetle outbreaks. That's why I gave them this little party hats. So we need an operational outbreak monitoring system to quantify the surfaces affected and to support forest management with early detection of outbreaks. So to do that, we are using Sentinel-2 time series. So these are satellites doing large-scale acquisitions with a 5-day revisit with a resolution of 10 to 20 meters, depending on the spectral bands, which are available in the visible and the infrared. And the data is free and available from the end of 2015. So these are very valuable information from which we need to derive a relevant vegetation index. So canopy water content is identified as a relevant indicator for the early detection of bark-beetle outbreaks. So we are using a homemade vegetation index called the CR-SWIR, which is highly sensitive to vegetation water content. And it's ratio between the reflectance of the band 11 of Sentinel-2 and the baseline defined by the neighboring bands. And so we calculate this vegetation index for the whole time series for every acquisition of Sentinel-2 since the launch of the satellites. And here we can see the time series of a healthy pixel and an attacked pixel. And the first step is to mask the cloud and the shadows. And now we can see that there is a strong periodicity of our vegetation index for healthy spruce stands. And in case of an attack, there is a sudden increase of CR-SWIR. So then we use the first 2 years as training data. So we assume that it is before disturbances. And we fit a harmonic model on these first 2 years before 2018. So this is meant to predict the vegetation index seasonality for every pixel. And so then we apply a threshold so that every acquisition whose vegetation index is above this threshold is considered an anomaly. And as soon as we have 3 successive anomalies, we consider that the pixel is an outbreak. So, but since our vegetation index is sensitive to vegetation water content, droughts can also lead to successive anomalies. So the method allows that if you have 3 successive acquisitions without anomalies, the pixel is no longer considered attacked. So this is our methods, and then we can export the results as shapefiles where the polygons contain the period when the first anomaly was detected, and also a confidence class which is based on the intensity of anomalies. And we can also export time lapses and time series graph to explore the data further. And we have validated this method using ground observations obtained by the French forestry institutions. And so we've compared the observed state and the predicted state at the date of observation on 619 ground observation, and we get a pretty good overall agreement. So we have started mapping in France bark-beetle outbreaks in the northeast of France on a large scale, and we've updated the production every few months since summer 2021. So there are some limitations because of climate change and forest management. Sometimes the harmonic models can get obsolete. And also you can have confusions with other forest cover alterations. But still it fulfills the need for an operational outbreak monitoring system, at least in France. And so it can be updated whenever a new Sentinel-2 acquisition is available. And it gives a good performance even in diverse contexts. And also our method is fully encapsulated in a Python package, which is open, documented, along with tutorials and a small data set for testing. It's simple enough to be used and understood by non-experts. And you can change the parameters to adapt it also for other issues. So if you want to try it, you can find it on GitLab. So thank you.
Yeah, so that was perfect timing. Thank you. Questions? There's probably questions about Sentinel's band 11. No? I don't know. No technical questions so far? Well, I do have actually one concerning, maybe I misunderstood or maybe I didn't get it. Is this actually something that the signal that you're getting that is visible, or this is something sort of like an early signal that is not visible to the human eye? So you can actually detect something before it occurs.
So you can see it before it occurs. Like as you can see, there was this stress periods where droughts can cause temporary anomalies. So we can detect that, and maybe it gives information that maybe this is a vulnerable stand, but then we only detect it once. We actually detect 2/3 of green attack bark-beetle outbreaks, because that's first the green stage, when the canopy is still green, but there is a change in the vegetation water content. Then it gets red, so it's visible to the naked eye, and then the leaves fall and it gets it's a gray attack. And so we detect it a little bit early, but we are not sure until the anomalies get a little bit higher, because it can also be temporary or other issues.
Yeah, as promised, now it's time for repairing or restoring. Yes, and it's a pleasure to announce our first speaker, which is, I would say, the queen of systematic review, Gillian Petrokofsky from Oxford University. And she will present a review of implementing forest-related nature-based approaches from afforestation to forest landscape restoration, FLR. So the floor is yours, Gillian.
Thank you. I don't think I've ever been called a queen before, and nobody who knows me would agree that that's accurate. Good. Sorry, Corolla. It's amazing what's happening behind the scenes here, like all the clever stuff. So thanks for inviting me here. Now, you can see there are 14 people on this, this presentation. I'm Jill Petrokofsky, and I'm presenting it for everybody else, but John Stanhope is the leader. So our presentation explores a specific topic, but we hope the messages of our systematic, collaborative, cross-disciplinary working within UFRO on a key challenge for land management will have resonance beyond our research topic. So a nature-based solution is not a new concept for managing land, for changing climate, biodiversity, and so on. We have a lot of familiar concepts that we've dealt with over the years, but there are some newcomers on the scene, and nature-based solutions is one of them. And does it matter that we've got all these different terms, which essentially are talking about the similar things, aren't they? About managing land wisely and sustainably. Terminology does change over time. Are these differences important? Do we understand each other when we're talking with these different terms? And very importantly, are other people who are outside our bubble understanding us, particularly funding agencies, policymakers? So we sought in this project to clarify how 7 common terms and concepts are used in the scientific literature. You can see the terms that we dealt with here. So under the leader of John Standherf, we employed a novel systematic evidence synthesis method for finding and reviewing relevant published academic literature. 14 of us worked in a lockdown collaboration from that task force that you saw at the beginning. And we had a lot of fun doing this during lockdown. A lot of collaboration, typical UFRO fun, learning about Zoom and so on. So it was a 3-phase stage. The project, the methodology was 3 phases. First stage, search, where we identified through a systematic search just over 11,000 records in Web of Science that contained at least one of these 7 terms that we're interested in. Phase 2, we selected by random number generator 100 articles for each of our 7 terms, and we looked at those to see had the authors defined those terms in the paper. If they had, they went through to phase 3, which had 122 papers in, and at this phase 3 was a very intensive period for the 14 people, a wonderful collaboration, wonderful coordination by Dr. William Harvey, who's in here getting us all together on Zoom, and documenting data, 32 fields of data from a template so that we didn't introduce our individual biases about what those papers said. So a brief flavor of some of the results that we got. There's an awful lot in there, and watch this space for the publications that will be coming out following this talk. So data of the first instance of each use of these terms, which are very similar, cover very similar grounds, from the oldest 1903, afforestation, of course, all the way through to the newest, the new boy on the block, mentioned in 2009, nature-based solutions, or nature climate solutions, sometimes called. Now, a striking finding from reading these papers was how few of these papers, relatively few, actually defined the terms that they're using. I know Renate Brühl is in the audience here, and she will find this not surprising, but disappointing. This table shows how many of those 100 randomly selected papers that use these terms actually provided a definition or told us anything about how the authors were using these concepts. So this might not be surprising for a well-established term, 1903, like afforestation, but it seems to us a little troubling for the new term like nature-based solutions, which we may be less familiar with. No definition. So when we dug down into these papers, we've heard a lot about the importance of SDGs this morning from Daniela and others. We looked at whether the papers themselves were reporting on any of the 3 pillars of sustainability, which is, after all, at the heart of these so-called nature-based approaches. The results show that the environment is well represented across the term. But look, rather worryingly in grey, the economic aspects of SDGs rather poorly dealt with in these papers, particularly in nature-based solutions. But I'll draw your attention to the forest landscape restoration group of papers actually dealt with this very much better, much richer. So we dug further down into these papers to look at not just whether they were using, they were defining, and they were reporting on high-level SDGs, but what about the sustainability impacts within each of the SDGs? And this is a heat map. You can see if it's got red spots, it's missing data. If it's green, it's hitting its markers. Again, the gaps are telling. There were more gaps in the nature-based solutions set than the FLR, the forest landscapes restoration set, which, and even though both of them have well-published guidance and principles upon which these projects under their umbrella are supposed to be dealing with these sustainability impacts and reporting on them. So that was an interesting finding for us. FLR doing rather better there on hitting its marks for those sustainability indicators. And the NBS principles, there are 8 of them here. Again, we compared all of them. I'm just showing you 2 here. Nature-based solutions, forest landscape restoration. Economic feasibility, again, rather underreported in the NBS, and FLR doing rather better. And again, governance and people better for forest landscape restoration than NBS, nature-based solutions. So just to leave you with some key messages, there's lots more in the report. A lot of papers lack clarity on what the authors mean by the terms they're employing, and they lack detail about the sustainability impacts and principles that their projects have set out to deliver. We hesitate to suggest that people might be using the term nature-based solutions to capture attention and rather superficially, but it could be a finding. It's a hypothesis to explore. And so we encourage authors to provide clarity when they're using these concepts, and not just throw out the good old terms that we're familiar with, good guiding principles, and bringing in new concepts which they are failing to report on adequately. So that's a very quick summary. Thank you to everybody for the collaboration. Thank you, Andreas.
Yeah, of course, thank you, Gillian. I think it's really a very important, also basic work, and I think a very valuable basis to work upon. Yeah, our next speaker is Palle Madsen from Innovating company in Denmark, and it seems to be a session of long titles: RFFL, Science, Practice, Interactions through Long-Term Demonstration, Research and Monitoring Experiment at Operational Scale in Central Asia. So I think it's more or less research and development and monitoring.
Thank you, Andreas. You almost made all my talk there. Yes, thanks. And in tandem with all the academic discussions on principles and approaches and concepts, we also need to actually get something done on the ground and find and try to make the global solutions we need turned into local solutions on the ground. And there we need so much to collaborate with practitioners, stakeholders on the ground to try to identify what will be the solutions for tomorrow, because tomorrow will not be like yesterday. And there will be a great need for really find adaptive measures to manage forest and afforestation in the future. And this example here from Central Asia is one of the first examples of this initiative of a new generation of long-term demonstration experiments fulfilling that purpose. Resilient Future Forest Lab, we call it, and it's thought to use IUFO as hub, as the network center for such initiatives across the globe, where we use the network of IUFO to actually find partners in this global network for setting up something like this. And as you see here, we are working in Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, and it's low forest cover countries. The main purpose for what we're doing in these two countries with our colleagues there is afforestation to improve or actually, improve erosion control. It's not to do afforestation with the main aim of production or biodiversity. That's of course also services that will be considered, but it's the main aim is erosion control in these landscapes. And you can see it's absolutely an area, a region in the world where there's not too much rain in the growing period. And there's also another challenge there, that's rather big populations of domestic stock that actually makes it very difficult to establish forest there. So the new thing here is that by establishing such demonstration areas, we want to not just explore the local experiences the best we can with the local collaboration there. That's key, but also to install and test innovative solutions and compare them with business as usual or doing nothing. That's the three-step approach that's so important, and actually thereby establish these long-term demonstration sites in the network of IUFRO that we hope can facilitate demonstration, building evidence, building documentation, but also be used for communicating what we can do with sustainable forest management, sustainable restoration on a long-term scale, because the key here is we are addressing, as always with forestry and forest restoration, we're addressing long-term issues. And we need to have places where we can actually work on that and take the first steps in scaling up from talking about it to actually doing something on the ground and getting a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders, and a lot of practitioners involved, so we can improve the linkage between the academic research world and what can actually make good sustainable solutions on the ground. This is from Kyrgyzstan, and you can again see landscape here. There is an older afforestation project on this hillside, but we want to work on gradients, on what we call challenging sites and gentle sites, and then test different methods there, including also methods that address the browsing issue. And this is the next slide, and the last slide is from Uzbekistan, where we have a wonderful example of a 100-year-old afforestation project that actually serves as inspiration of what it can deliver on the long-term scale. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Palle. I think this is also a very important ingredient to have demonstration network all over the world, because to show up and to inform and show people more or less what's going on for landscape restoration. Yes, our next speaker is not here. He is online, but he will not do it more or less on the stage, but we have a recorded presentation by Rene Zamora-Cristales from the World Resource Institute, and his title is Innovating Public Incentives for Nature-Based Solution. And it's the question is, how can we finance forest landscape restoration? Are there any ideas or any pathways?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Rene Zamora. I'm Senior Policy Manager at the World Resource Institute here in Washington, D.C. And today I'm going to share with you in these 5 minutes some innovative public policies that we are good morning, good afternoon. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Rene Zamora. I'm Senior Policy Manager at the World Resource Institute here in Washington, D.C. And today I'm going to share with you in these 5 minutes some innovative public policies that we are supporting for scaling up landscape restoration, which is the topic of one of the topics of the session. One of the things we are working is there basically incentive, and we have different kinds of incentives. We are working with governments, which is public finance basically, And we are trying to leverage either direct payments, tax reliefs, or credits that can be given to people, no? Or banks or financial institutions to leverage resources for landscape restoration. And this is a very innovative program. Basically, we identify entrepreneurs first, public entrepreneurs, people that is working on the public sector. Once we identify them, we provide the space so they can exchange knowledge and peer-to-peer learning, which is the most valuable for them. And then, we try to identify the policy bottlenecks, which is a challenging thing, but we are working at the regulation level. So we are not working at the law, or changing a policy or creating a new policy is challenging and takes time. But once the policy is done, most of the changes can be done by changing the regulation. So we are working at the regulation level. And once you identify the regulation level, we propose some solutions. So, and that's a work that we do with the governments. It's not that something that as an organization we do, but we work together with them and then we identify the solutions, potential solutions with them. Once they identify the potential solutions, they implement that, and then we support them by providing them some tools for monitoring effectiveness of policy, which is a very important aspect of this. We are also working in a knowledge hub, which one of the aspects is to really look into these different interventions in restoration, and then trying to identify challenges that we have in terms of policy. And what is the literature or the information that is available on many of them. This is constantly evolving, but we are working on that too. And in terms of, sorry, the bottlenecks that we are already working with, one is in Mexico. We are working with irrigation districts, basically to do support more the like a private payment for ecosystem services for farmers that are using the water for irrigation, for agricultural practices. They pay the people that is producing the water in either in a conservation area of the watershed or on another area. So that's one of the areas that we are supporting. The other one is the environmental compensation system, which is basically looking at ecological equivalence. If you remove a natural area, you need to replace that with at least the similar or the same area that you remove it. No? So we are helping El Salvador to find these ecological equivalents so they can compensate that. The other one is a monitoring protocol that we are following with the Payment for Ecosystem Services in Guatemala, which is a monitoring protocol that can use remote sensing tools so they can basically start monitoring all the projects remotely, and also with some field validation, but mostly remotely, that will save them several costs that they have. And then in Chile, we were working with DEI, basically what are the diversity and inclusion considerations on the Payment for Ecosystem Services program, which they call it like the incentive program for native forest restoration. So again, we are working on this cycle here that we have, but basically we are identifying with the government the bottlenecks, and then we try to identify some solutions. We are also, once we have the set of solutions, because it cannot be just one, we are also supporting on the monitoring part, which is monitoring effectiveness of the policy or the solution of the policy once it's implemented. How you can support this program? I invite all you members to serve as mentors or provide information for the Knowledge Hub, or funding for the program, which is much needed for the countries especially, and then co-create solutions in terms of research. So that's where we are. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you in the live session. So Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Rene. And we are staying in Latin America with the next two talks. And the first speaker is Mayra Tavares, and her presentation is Restoration of the Atlantic Forest in Brazil, Motivations and Barriers from the Perspective of Rural Landowners. So Mayra, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here to present a little bit about my country. So Atlantic Forest is a hotspot of biodiversity restoration and is one of the most degraded biomes in the world. So today, since decolonization, we had a lot of drives of deforestation, and we had now a forest really fragmented. And so we need to restore this forest. And one of the bottlenecks of restoration in Brazil is how to convince landowners to restore. They are the main actor to restoration is in their land that nature restoration happens. And 53% of all native vegetation are in private areas. So the objective of my research is to understand what are the motivations, barriers, difficulties of the landowners to restore their forests. So I focus in two groups of landowners. One that receive the support of NGO, other that didn't receive, so S and NS. My research, the area of operation of an NGO located in the southeast of Brazil named Copaíba, is a case study. I interviewed 68 landowners there, and did a qualitative content analysis. So it's in progress, my research, so I will present some preliminary results. Almost of half of my sample is in between these two groups. And we can see clear difference between these two groups. So who is looking for projects for restoration, who is looking for support, most of them are not rural producers. What this means, that the main income doesn't come from rural production, come from other kinds of incomes, and who is not, in my sample, who is not receiving support, most of them, opposite of that, they are rural producers. They consider themselves rural producers, and their main income come from the land. And we can see also different techniques of restoration in these two groups. So who is receiving support of the project? Most of them are planting seedlings, and otherwise, it was a really interesting result because 80% of them restore at least a patch of forest, but they are using natural regeneration as main technique. So nature is growing for them, the forest. And I will explain three main difficulties and motivations and incentives that we could see in this research. So as in both of them, we have similarities, for example, the cost of restoration, but the cost who is planting trees is much more than natural regeneration. So the difficulties who are planting seedlings are cost of restoration, difficult through implementation, labor, and the other group that's using more natural regeneration that didn't receive the support are the loss of area as the main income come from the land, and almost 22% of them said they don't have difficulties because they are using natural regeneration, and they are growing the forest in the areas that they are not producing. And as motivation, the most cited motivation was idealistic motivation. What this means? The people want to restore, to contribute to the future generations with the world. And this is really appear in the group that are support for the NGO. They are the non-rural producers, and appear also in the rural producers, but it's more different kinds of motivation. So with the least water, and 20% of them said they don't have motivation to restore. And as incentive, as we have different kinds of landowners, and some of them depend of the land, PSA is payment for ecosystem service. I put in Portuguese, sorry. So who didn't receive support, they would like to receive money for that. So payment for ecosystem service was the most incentive cited. Otherwise, who received the support, they would like more support for restore because they are receiving seedlings and technical support. They would like labor and fancy, for example. So as a key message, I would like to highlight the importance of social aspect in ecological restoration. So we need to involve rural landowners in the planning of projects of restoration. So know the difference between landowners, the context. They are the people who is going to restore. So they need to be part of that. And so for next steps, I would like to understand better these links between these variables and to do a land use change analysis to understand where this forest is growing in this region. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayra. Perfectly in time and very nice example also. Yes, our next speaker, and we stay still in Brazil, is Aurelio Padovezi from the University of Padua. And his presentation is called Brazilian Policy Instruments for Social Innovative Forest and Landscape Restoration, Exploring Complexity.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good night. Thank you for coming and watch this presentation. Well, my name is Aurelio Padovezi. I'm a PG candidate at the University of Padua in Italy. And along the last 3 years, I'm investigating the social innovation phenomenon under the umbrella of forest and landscape restoration. And today I'm going to share with you the results of a piece of this research trajectory. So the objective today is to present a few policy instruments like supportive to social innovative forest and landscape restoration and the governance structure ruling them in Brazil, focus in Brazil. So just to bring the topic up, social innovative and forest landscape restoration is a concept where social innovation happens together with forest and landscape restoration. So it comes up with pretty much with a group of people, local people that come up, realize that nature contribution to people is also local social needs. And they start to do collective actions to change this reality. We have identified and described some cases of social innovative forest and landscape restoration connect to agroecology, seed collectors network, and landscape and commons governance. So we went through 64 policy documents connected to 12 policies from 4 policy domains to do the analysis, the results I'm going to present. And at the beginning, we thought that we are not going to find much policy instruments supporting SIFLR. But for our surprise, we found more than 100 policy instruments supporting somehow, most of them connected to the economy issue. For example, payment for existing services, but we also identify instruments for other approaches like planning, landscape planning, regulatory, and informational as well. So this is the complexity of the structure we identify. In the first line, we can see the policy, the 4 policy domains, followed by the policies, the 12 policies. And then we can see the regulations connect to these policies, the boards, the executors, the plans and programs, and the bottom line, the financing instructing support in the implementation of this policy. So we found that we have a very fragile landscape approach, landscape governance approach in this. We just thought the water policy having this approach, connecting different landscape with interconnected governance structure in the planning, execution, and implementing. But even this policy doesn't have instruments to support the local social innovators to do something different. For example, organize a group of seed collectors. We also saw that although we have many policy instruments, they are not connected. As we can see in this chart, most of the lines connecting the instruments with the governance are horizontal. We don't have much vertical lines, and the different instruments are separated in different governance structure to execute. They don't communicate much. So we have an uncoordinated policy issue here. So our recommendation based on this policy analysis is to come up, we are suggesting to create a national agency for landscape restoration. So something we have similar in the water policy in Brazil. We have this is the water agency. So we are suggesting to create a national agency for take care of the landscape restoration in a way to connect all those instruments that we saw separately, and also consider to have a governance that involve the local scale who are implementing the restoration actions. And finally, for those who want to know more about the bridging aspect of social innovation and forest landscape restoration, I do recommend it to have a look on this short video. It's just 2 minutes. And thank you very much.
Many thanks, Aurelio. And I think it's a very interesting example for institutional transformation suggestions. Reminds me a bit to the discussion what we had and in the last session. Okay, now we will have again a recorded presentation by Faqrul Islam Chowdhury, and he will speak about forest landscape restoration that shall improve tree coverage in Bangladesh, Kutupalong, Rohingya refugee camps. So, thanks.
Welcome to my presentation. I am Faqrul Islam Chowdhury. I am a pre-doctoral researcher at CREAF, Barcelona. And I also have the affiliation as an assistant professor of forestry at the Institute of Forestry and Environmental Sciences of the University of Kutupalong. So today I will be presenting one of my research projects, which is forest landscape restoration, improved tree coverage in Bangladesh, Kutupalong Rohingya refugee camps. In August 2017, about 700,000 Rohingya citizens came to Bangladesh and settled in Bukit Peninsula, and it resulted in a massive deforestation, approximately 4,000 acres of forest land, and it deforested within days. And in the image, the blue arrow indicating the deforested area. To recover this deforested area, different governmental and non-governmental organizations launched restoration programs using native trees, and it started from 2018. And in the image, it has been shown that the Rohingya volunteers are working in the plantation activities. So the project's research question was, is the forest landscape restoration improved tree coverage in Kutupalong Rohingya refugee camps? I did this research with 2 of my other teammates. And in this image, I am showing you a plantation site in Kutupalong camps, which is established in 2018. So in this research, we follow a 2-step method. In the first step, we use land use change analysis, and in the second step, we use tree sampling approach. In the first step, we use the satellite images from 2017 to 2022 to find out the change in the land use. And in the second step, we find 45 plots, which size is 10 meter and 10 meter area. So the land use change analysis then told us that forest has been increasing over the time, but the degraded forest and plantation is decreasing. And this decreasing trend may help the increasing of the forest areas. But the alarming situation is water body is decreasing in the site. So in the tree diversity status in Kutupalong camps, we found like in the restoration site, there are 19 species planted in the area, and the survival rate was 75%, and the Shannon diversity was 2.99. But we also find like 32 regenerating tree species. So the result shows us higher number of regenerating trees in the campsites than the restoration projects. So the overall recommendation was introduction of more tree species may help to reach the biodiversity in the national forest. As we are seeing that the regenerating tree species has the higher number than the plantation sites. Thank you for your attention. If there is any question, I am open to ask.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a good example how social disruption and displaced people may play also an important role for forest landscape restoration. Yeah, now our next speakers, and we are switching from Asia to Africa, is Leonard Shibwana. And he will talk about the innovative capacity building for FLR implementation Malawi, and he's from the Center of Applied System Analysis in Lilongwe in Malawi. So Leonard, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leonard Shibwana. I'm standing here as the human face of forest landscape restoration implementation in Malawi from a practitioner's point of view. I'm presenting an innovative capacity building program that is being jointly implemented between Center for Applied Systems Analysis and the IUFRO SPDC program. Over there, you can see two pictures. Water paradigm, forest degradation and restoration. It's a problem and an answer at the same time. As I said, coming from a practitioner's point of view, what you can see there is degradation happening in Malawi, a lot of it, along riparian areas. And on the right-hand side is also a picture to give you a feel of how much degradation is happening along cultivated farmlands. And so FLR comes as a viable solution. CASA is implementing this in Malawi, joint, as I mentioned, with IUFRO. But from our own local experience, we define it as a social process that requires multi-stakeholder collaboration, involving as well unseen institutions in our African context. And so here I will invite Steve. We are going to see a 2-minute video that's going to be played. The one who will be speaking is my co-author, Dr. Steve, who happens to be the director of Center for Applied Systems Analysis and also the dean of the University of Natural Resources.
About 80% of the land area in Malawi is degraded. This is translating to about 8 million hectares. And out of this, the Malawi government has committed to restore 4.5 million hectares by 2030. With the growing number of restoration projects in the country to achieve Malawi's 4.5 million hectares of degraded land to be restored by 2030, there is a growing demand for personnel with expertise in forest landscape restoration. so that they can facilitate the process to ensure that there are actions taking place on the ground. However, many of our universities and colleges in the country, they do not have the restoration curriculum in their programs. As such, many of the graduates that come from the university don't have the required capacity to facilitate forest landscape restoration. It is based on this that the Center for Applied System Analysis, in collaboration with the Special Program on Development of Capacities of UFRO, with funding from Admas Watkins Foundation of Switzerland and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Finland, supported the program on capacity building on forest landscape restoration in the country. This program that we are offering is based on the FLR Practitioner's Guide, which UFRO developed. The way we have designed our training on the ground is that the first 7 modules provide the first part, the students get into the classroom and undergo theoretical understanding of what forest landscape restoration is all about. And then after that, they are attached to the field in order to have the field experience working with the local actors on the ground so that they acquire the skills that are required to facilitate and implement forest landscape restoration on the ground.
Thank you very much. And as Dr. Steve said, we are taking FLR as a viable option that we are selling to government. And so what are the results and way forward for upscaling? So far, 50 facilitators have been trained and actively engaged in multi-stakeholder platforms, like in riverine restoration, but also cultivated farmlands. But also a learning site has been established within the urban areas where different organizations are coming to appreciate the potential that forest landscape restoration brings about. And so we are being asked again to provide this training to other stakeholders for their facilitators to go and continue the work of restoring our degraded landscapes. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think for this really encouraging example, I think that is also very important to show up with. Yes, now we're coming to our last speaker, and it's my pleasure to announce Melanie Feurer from the University of Freiburg and the Bern University of Applied Sciences. And the title of her presentation is Co-Benefits and Restoring Mangrove Ecosystems and Livelihoods for the Poor, Case Study in Myanmar Delta.
Okay, so we need to go back to Southeast Asia just for a little bit. I'm presenting a study I did together with Rikov a little while ago, and hopefully we'll have the slides ready soon. Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, so I'll go. Sorry for this. So the study is on mangrove restoration. The background, as you see, it's a situation where mangrove have been deforested in the past to paddy fields, which were later then degraded mainly through saltwater intrusion. So the idea in this area was to restore mangroves with a community forestry approach, which means that there were community forestry user groups were built, and they established a management plan, which they decided upon with the forest department. This is actually a bit a different presentation that is here. Okay, can you go back to the last slide quickly? Thank you. The question was, how do different households benefit from these restored mangroves? We used a research methodology, including participatory action research with various tools and a household survey. Next slide, please. So first of all, we looked at which mangrove products are actually used by the different households. And we looked at two different groups. On top, you see the households that were part of the official community forest user group. And below, you see those households who were not part. And what you see here, especially, is that actually this doesn't work. Okay, so that there are not that big differences. And especially for non-timber forest products, you see they are used by the households that are part of the user group and those that are not. There's a slight difference that you see with the small timber, so posts, poles, there's a bigger difference. But other products, including crab and nipa palm that also have commercial value, they're actually used by the majority of households in this region. Next slide, please. Next, we also looked at poverty, the poorer households and the richer households, and how is their different use. Again, comparing first the households that were part of the community forestry user group on the right side, and those who are not, you see that actually the income contribution from mangroves is much higher for those who are part of the user group. But then when we look at the wealth groups, which you see on the bottom line, we see that mostly the poorest households, they have a lot of income coming from the mangroves, so 30%, which does not mean that the others, even the richer households, they also use mangrove products for income. Next slide, please. So the key messages from this research is, first of all, mangroves. We have not talked about mangrove ecosystems yet, but they provide huge amount of benefits for local communities. And what we said this morning and also in this session is that people, they're very valuable for restoration. They actually, in this case, they really served as catalysts. Then there's a remaining challenge in illegal logging, but especially one thing I want to mention is the use of these non-timber forest products. As you saw, they're used by most households. However, they are not regulated in the management plan. And also those households not participating in the official user group, they're not part of this decision-making process. So finally, what we want to say is the inclusion of all forest users should be considered in restoration, and not only of those who participate in these formal user groups. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, and I would like to invite all speakers also to our stage here. And I know it's been a long day and our brains are filled with lots of information, but I guess we should have still a sort of really stimulating discussion. As Henrik already said, it's up to you. And if you're on the way here to the stage, and I'm not sure, asking more or less our technical staff, is it also possible to look if there are some colleagues or some presenters, online presenters are able to link? So please, Gillian, come. And my first question around the table is, seems to be simple, but perhaps it's tricky. What do you think what we can learn from each other in terms of forest mortality detection or forest landscape restoration? So easy question, easy to answer perhaps. So Jan Peter, if you may start.
this working? Yeah. That's indeed a very good question. I can just say from my part, because I haven't worked so much in the restoration realm, but more in the mortality realm. What we are doing at the moment, there was one slide which I was not able to show anymore because the time was over. Since we surveyed or analyzed a very huge number of observation plots, we thought that in our statistical models, random slopes play quite a big role. And random slopes are, from a statistic point of view, they can be bad because they somehow can vanish your main effect that you want to show. But since there's evidence that the many plots that we analyzed differ in their relationship between drought and mortality, there's also a chance, because we can interrogate where's this variation coming from, because there's a lot of information which is available but haven't been integrated yet. For instance, the forest type, the management type, the soil type, and so on. So, and our idea is more that we interrogate these random effects more and try to learn which effects are driving these differences. There, of course, it might be due to the fact that there are factors like difference in the genetic background, which we cannot change so fast, but there might be also some other effects like difference in management, which drive these differences. And I think like extracting these from the many observations we have could be probably one starting point.
Yeah, thank you. I missed to inform you also about one demand is really to try to say it in 1 or 2 sentences. Otherwise, more or less, we are at the end of the discussion when we're at the end of the roundtable. So Gillian, please, in 1 or 2 sentences, what do you think we can learn?
Very quickly then, I think communication is the key. How do we explain to people who are trying to fund our work or read our work, who are not specialists, what we mean? The Malawi colleagues did a wonderful example because they showed how we develop themes from the bottom up using people, and we train them, and then we can communicate with them. So let's stop writing papers with flashy words like science provides solutions. We don't, we provide questions and ranges of options maybe, and deal more with doing what we say we're going to do and training people in those processes, which forest landscape restoration does beautifully.
Yep, and I think we need, is it on? Yeah. I think we need to really acknowledge that the challenges we're talking about is challenges for a planet with 8 billion people on board that needs to transform from fossil dependency to sustainable future. So we need to be open for what solutions will carry us safely through into the future. And we have to be clear, we have to be very structured in how we deal with these issues. And I think the science community should take the lead there and be very structured, but always remember to connect to local experience.
Thanks, Palle.
I think our challenge is a world challenge, how to involve landowners in science community. So here, I don't know if there is some landowners here that could talk with us. So communication is the key, and context. We need to learn with them to communicate, because we communicate using different kinds of terms that they don't understand. So we need to take in account the context, learning with them, making them part of the process and the planning, everything that we are on. I think we a long time we only were focused in natural, how to grow better forests and not in the social part. And now is the time, and that's my message, really.
Thank you.
Yes, adding to that, I feel we all agree on how important restoration is. We see the global benefits, but we need to acknowledge as well that actually communities living in rural areas, living near forests, they also value the environment, and they're supporting restoration if it is done the right way. So we need to understand these perspectives and integrate.
Without taking away whatever my previous speakers have said, I think what I can add as well is that contexts differ, as we said. In our context, it would be to push the FLR agenda onto the priority list. Sometimes FLR, as you may agree, requires funds, and it's a costly process. In our context, we are working very hard so that in decision-making processes, FLR becomes a priority. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Aurelio?
Hello. So as a final consideration, reflection, it's what we are facing as a society, a very complex problem that deal with many political areas, and to come up with solutions with that, we are not going to find a silver bullet or a superhero. We need to count on very local and specific solutions, and that will require power review, the power balancing that lead us to this situation have to be reviewed, and we will find some bumps, economic and political, along the way, and that will be normal. That will be normal. That's my message.
Before restoration, I think it's important to mitigate degradation. So in France, we've planted spruce as monoculture after the war, and at low altitudes where it was already a bit vulnerable. So that played a role in the fact that now we have lots of areas to restore. And so we have had subsidies these years to restore the other area, but it seems that we have not learned all the lessons, because I know that a lot of areas were replanted with monoculture of Douglas firs, which now don't show many problems, but we don't know in the future. And the issue is that nobody really knows what trees we can plant now, which will still be adapted to the environment because of climate change in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think lots of, good ideas. And now, but I think Aurelio talked about superhero. So who will be the superhero? And asking the right question now in the moment. So the floor is yours, and please ask your questions. But we have also one audience. I think it's Faqrul. Is it right? Yeah. So what do you think that we can learn from each other in terms of forest landscape restoration?
Well, I think in different areas of the world has different kind of ecosystems. So as the world is changing, or the climate change, like drought and pest attack happening all over the world. So it is important to understand what is happening where and what time, what is the process of this kind of mortality happens, and how this can be helping us in FLR and everything. That's it.
Great.
Thank you.
I think that's a very contribution. So now the question in the back. I think microphones. Yeah, John, you got the second, but the first one is it's our colleague from Kenya.
My name is Jesse from Kenya Forest Research Institute. I'm asking in regards to all our restoration ideals, what about indigenous species, especially for us who, most of them are not documented, and even for the case of Malawi, I was even wondering how much germplasm are you able to generate from the communities to do this restoration activities? Thank you.
I think there's a question for you, Leonard.
Thank you, Jesse, for asking. Yeah, in our talk within the country, definitely the option has been to restore using indigenous tree species. Like in the case that we showed here, we also opted that we're using Kaya thotheca, which is red mahogany, I think. We realized that these are maybe more resilient and therefore can serve multiple benefits as well for both society and everyone. Luckily enough, it does happen that in the survey that was done through what we call the NHBG, the National Herbarium and Botanical Gardens, which is a department, I think part of the forestry department, they realized that the tree was already there along all the riparian areas, but due to degradation, it nearly all went away. And so it's like really going back using indigenous tree species, which we recognize that are more resilient and would provide multiple benefits.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very important question, non-native versus native species and all the pros and cons of it. But John, before I give you the floor, I would like to invite also Rene perhaps to a statement about what do you think we can learn from each other in terms of forest landscape restoration?
Hi, Andres, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you clearly.
Okay. Yeah. Can you repeat the question just to hear it well?
Yeah, so that the question is, what do you think what we can learn from each other in terms of forest landscape restoration?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah. So we can, and thanks for the question. There are many things, that are happening. Landscape restoration is multi-sectorial. There are many angles on this, many land uses. Well, one thing we can learn is how different landscapes are addressing different problems. To the discussion on exotic versus natives, for example, I know that the preference is natives, but in some places, for example, in Colombia, we have learned that some exotic species can help soil to recover when it's when it has been affected by toxicity from mercury. So there is an exotic species that can help to solve that problem first, and then allows the natives to come back later. So those are the kind of learnings that we can exchange from different parts of the world. And again, everything depends on landscape restoration. Everything depends on the baseline. Thank you.
Thank you, Rene. So now, John, the floor is yours.
I want to maybe broaden your question, but I want to put Jill on the spot with this one. Jill, FLR has been around for 20 years, and we're really still struggling with how to implement it and have it live up to expectation. At the same time, we have all these other terms, these sexy terms jumping up and trying to catch the eye of funding agencies. And we have our non-forest ecosystem people trying to get on the same bandwagon with the decade on ecosystem restoration. Can you give our non-forest colleagues any guidance on how to avoid some of the problems that we faced over the last 20 years with implementing FLR?
That's a great question, John, but I was looking forward to reading your paper on this, which we were just talking about. Okay, so lessons for the future, really, I think is if we have our set of guiding principles in FLR. We know people don't read what things are supposed to mean. How to avoid this pitfall? Well, UFRO has all this knowledge about what these different processes and concepts mean. So we do need to keep revisiting it and boiling it down to the essential, not the definitions, that's too top down, but what does it mean? What are we measuring? What are we setting out to measure? Does this fit your bill? And I think you'd find the indicators fit the bill, even if the term doesn't look as if it fits the bill. So I think your point about earlier, how to avoid the pitfalls of just keep going for these new sexy terms or whatever, is to concentrate on what we mean to do and what we mean to report by this. What are we achieving by this initiative? And if those folks can read some of the background stuff before setting off on saying, oh, well, I'll have a new term, a new concept, I think that might help a great deal, but it comes back to communication. It comes back to making research available. So it's a challenge for you, Fro, as well, I think. Sorry, that's probably a bit of a back to you, John, question. What do you think is the answer? But yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, thank you. May I have also one comment on it? Is it more or less all the question, science people tend to be, have concepts, are theoretical and discussing about definition, but I think for FLR, it's very important to bridge the gap to implementation. And so I think, I believe in the magic of best practice examples. What we've heard, for example, in Malawi and others, and other people get enthusiastic about and say, hey, we would do it also the same way. But it's quite clear the challenges are different in the different regions. But I think the gap between being scientists and doing it is very important. Yeah, Aurelio?
Now, just a brief comment about that.
I think that someone mentioned today earlier that we already have a lot of solutions. We have solutions for problems that locally doesn't exist in some landscapes, of course. So in my perspective, the big challenge in to move the FLR agenda on forward is to empower local people of the solutions that already exist and do not produce or avoid to spend much of our time producing new concepts, new ideas, new approach, and use what we already have in the citizenship research approach, connecting what we already have produced in terms of acknowledgement to the local people, because they have the power to transform the landscape.
Yeah, Gebhard Schüler from Germany, Research Institute for Forest Ecology and Forestry. You told about the gap between the scientists and the practitioners, but I think, why do we need to restore the landscapes? There is a gap between the local people and maybe the responsibilities, and maybe also scientists who see that the landscape had been destroyed. I saw it when I heard the presentation about the mangrove forests, and you showed us the benefits for the local people there. And you said in the last slide, I saw there are co-benefits. I think the responsibilities, the responsibles, they didn't think about fuel wood out of the mangrove forest. They were thinking about the coastal erosion and to stop the coastal erosion and to get the land restored. And the people, so the question is it really in the people's thinking that they say, okay, yeah, I need also mangrove forests for protection the landscape, for local, also for the to stop the coastal erosion, or is it just, oh, we have mangrove forests and we get fuel wood out of it? I think that there would be a new gap between the responsibles and the local people.
Thank you very much, if I may react to that. You're very right. I'm talking about this case now. Actually, in this case, it was like that the conversion to paddy fields, that was policy driven. So the farmers were encouraged to, or actually they had to provide rice quotas. So that was driven from above. Also in the same area, there was a big typhoon that not so many people know about, but it was huge and it destroyed a lot of the fields. It destroyed a lot of homes and lives. And so people, they were very much aware of the benefits of the mangroves. And they were, in this case, they were really happy to restore. And actually the barren fields, they had not been used before. So it was added benefits. But I fully agree with you that in other situations that might be very different. Yes, but we need to, so in this regard, maybe what I want to say, we need to take into account also policy decisions, because they have a high influence on smallholders and communities.
Okay, maybe I want to be a little more provocative here now. This is a session where we do have mortality at one hand and we have restoration in the other, but I think we haven't mixed yet. We're all staying in our comfort zone and we do not want to really interact. I think the question a little bit, in my understanding, went into that direction. Okay, we have a situation now for our two mortality people that, you know, forests are heavily affected in Europe now, and we're starting to think about what are we going to do with these forests. And then there's all these group of other people working in different parts of the world, actually having that experience in restoring forests. Is there anything that we can learn from each other, not from the stakeholders in one particular area, but like, you know, can the climate scientists help the restoration people, you know, design strategies that your efforts actually will last beyond the next 30 years, and the other way around? Can we learn maybe now in Europe, Central Europe, what to do, how to find agreements, among stakeholders of where to go. This is a big discussion that we're having in Germany, and there's not a closed solution in sight, in my understanding. So I want you to be a little more interactive. You start.
This is not correct. I disagree. I just want to say that it's so important that of course it's important we think very carefully about what we do and that we get the terminology sorted out and all that, but we also have to be realistic that we will never sort out the terminology completely just by the fact that we are working with people globally with many different languages. And then I think we also need to have the courage simply to start working, start doing it, but never think or expect that we can identify the best solution, but work with portfolios and spread of risk, for heaven's sake. And then work with the local practitioners, the local experiences, include that, but always keep in mind, don't choose one solution, choose a row of solutions.
Okay, my question was rather in terms of skills. You know, how can we have a transfer of skills that we can actually take advantage of our experiences? That was rather not that, like, I'm not talking about the silver bullet that would work in Europe as well as it would work somewhere else, but different, yeah.
Yeah, just to react a little bit more to your question. The science will continue to provide the backstopping. Okay, like for the practitioners, I'm thinking of the guidelines, as I think our friend there said. If restoration has to go on and be successful, like in the Malawi context, we have insisted when we have had discussions with government officials from the forestry department or whatever, that it doesn't have to be the business as usual. We've had NFS, National Forestry Season, every year. It's not monitored, the results are not shared. And so that's where the science comes in, that the scientific knowledge has to be the backstopping, that everything is done in the right way, following scientific principles. And so the restoration will be done by the practitioners, utilizing the backstopping of the scientific knowledge. And I think that's how maybe the two sides can work together and progress. On the other hand, we have had a very exciting experience. We've had red mahogany, Kyanthothica trees, which were being grown. They have been grown for the past 50 years since our independence. This year, they have had to be cut because of a road expansion. And then we had a green movement saying, how can you cut a red mahogany tree that has been growing for 80 years or something? So it's about, again, balancing. We cannot stop maybe the destructive guys who maybe will be cutting the trees, maybe for certain purposes. So it's about balancing out why, restoring why, or using the trees for what benefits. I think that's where the discussion has to keep on between the practitioners, the local community, and the scientific community as the backstop.
I will be very quick this time. I think it's not just by chance that the mortality guys are heavily underrepresented in this group. This has a reason, because when you just every time say how bad the situation is, this is not helping a lot in this situation. But I think, at least from the viewpoint of forest monitoring, very often we say how bad the situation is, but potentially we are also able to say whether or not something has become better because of something like management or different schemes that you implement. But I think for this, it would be also necessary that at some point, forest hazard monitoring and also restoration monitoring needs to be better situated at the policy level. Yeah. This was very quick, I hope.
Yeah, thank you. And I would like also to say hello to Janice Burns, who is helping us with the online community. And there's also my question, are there any questions coming from the online community, online audience, also to our panel here? Hello, Janice.
Hello, thank you, Andreas. We haven't had a concrete question yet in the chat, but we have a few comments and observations, discussion going on related to the question. So maybe while those are coming, just following this discussions. I'd be interested from the panel now about, in view of the conference theme about global collaboration to promote a sustainable future for the forest, what kind of concrete collaboration opportunities could you imagine in relation to the work that you're doing or your projects? If any of you just have a short 1 sentence or 2 example how audience members or other panel members could maybe connect and further develop the work.
Join the Resilient Future Forest Lab, please.
Yeah, this of course what we're thinking. I think the international plot collaboration or network, I think this is one really important point, and we need this demonstration network, I guess. Jill?
Just super quickly, I think this is something that UFRO at the top kind of could think about for future conferences. This project that we did, the multidisciplinary, large-scale people working on a problem, can we have more conferences where this kind of out-of-bubble experience is possible? I know UFRO does brilliantly in getting people together, but I think I would love to know more about the mortality guys. They're very good at being very careful with what they monitor and measure. We don't see this coming through in the literature written up on some projects. Let's get some together and work out why that is. And it might answer John's question for other folks. Let's be clearer about what we are looking at and what we mean. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. And Rene, you want to have the floor?
Yeah, not just on the partnerships. I think as other colleagues were saying, we tend to work in silos, no, and that happens everywhere, IUFRO and others. But I think with the challenges we have in forests and climate change, we need to break those silos. No, the forest operation needs to work more with the forest restoration and vice versa, and that's an important thing to keep. And in terms of your question, Janice, we invite each of us here participating to Initiative 20 by 20, which is a partnership that we have in Latin America to restore degraded landscapes and we have from forest operations to biodiversity monitoring, and it's open to everybody that wants to contribute really and exchange information and in collaboration with IUFRO. Thank you.
Thank you, Rene. So I guess we are coming quite to our end. So it's not easy, I think, from my side to find famous last words. Yeah, but I think, for me, what I've learned on one side is I think we should continue with the collaboration or the beginning collaboration between more or less mortality or damage guys and the restoration guys, because I think it's very important to implement also and have the idea about future risk also into forest landscape restoration. Otherwise, we're restoring the landscape of the past and not of the future. So I guess this is one important point. Another point coming back also from what's said, I think, by Daniela Kleinschmidt and this morning was that, the people should be in the center of forest landscape restoration. It's not a technical issue or a technical task, but it's a societal or socioeconomic task. So it's very important also think about financing, what Rene said also. And we have lots of, I think, very encouraging examples. So if you look on Africa and also Asia and other parts of the Latin America, so there are promising examples, and it would be nice to learn from each other and to have also this linkage and networking, so to overcome isolated solutions or isolated thinking. Even if there is one solution fits for all, it's quite clear that that's not possible. But and every location or site had its specific challenges. But I guess to learn from each other, I think it's a promising approach, and we should follow this. Yeah, with this, I would like to thank you also for the audience after the long day. And I'm really happy that so many of you are still on board here and interested.
I think it was Palle saying that tomorrow is not going to be like yesterday. And I think we are used to having that situation, in particular in forestry, that we use the past as a sort of like a model for how we do this in the future. And I think we are beyond that point. it's just up to us now to actually realize that this is our new world and we have to go about this. And this means that we actually do need a new set of mind. And I think we're having a good starting point. And with this, I think we should applaud our speakers and the audience also.
Yeah, thank you.